You are now tuned in to Keeping It Real with Sana. Your thoughts, our voice.
Hey guys, welcome back to yet another episode of Keeping It Real with San and Yori. I'm especially excited for today's topic, which is the culture we consume. And an important question to answer in this episode is whether the culture we consume is killing the youth or is building the youth. So, what is the culture we consume?
What is the culture we consume? That's a very good question, and I feel like everybody might have a different answer to that question because it's such a broad question, and there's just so many cultures and trends and things that are existing in the world today, especially for the youth. But to us, the culture we consume is basically the lifestyle that we've adopted or we are forced to adopt as the youth from trends that are being set by other people, behaviors that are being used and implicated by other people, and basically just the manner in which we carry ourselves as a group that has now kind of forced it to like
Yeah,
grow in the sense amongst everyone else and be a standard of the way we carry ourselves.
yeah. So, let's get into this like on a real level. Firstly, just talking about the trends that we're seeing nowadays of this culture that we're speaking about, and the culture that we're consuming nowadays, I believe, is of a materialistic one, where if you're of a certain
Mm,
um, like industry, and if you're wearing like certain kinds of clothes or you're associated with certain people,
mm.
then you're relevant and you're the ish basically. And how does that culture now impact us as individuals and collectively as a group?
And the way I feel like that culture necessarily like impacts us is that it causes us to place our value in the hands of other people. Like
Right.
in the matter of how high we value ourselves depends on how high another person values us. You
Right.
know, for like example, if someone sees you and thinks like, oh, this person is pretty cool, or this person is, a great person to be around or to hang around, then we feel good as if like, we're the ish because people want to be around us. People are attracted to being around us and,
Yeah.
we just a vibe.
Yeah. And it's quite interesting when you say that, because we're placing value in someone or in people based on what we see externally rather than what is inside like a person internally. And that's not necessarily the case. Like somebody can have a really nice watch or like the latest Air Jordans, for example, but may not align with you necessarily as a person or what it is that you're trying to achieve as a person or as a collective. So that first impression that might impress you is a misleading one, because you might end up involving yourself in situations with people that you were never meant to involve yourself in the first place. And I feel like this is evident like on a broader scale based on the things we see, especially on like social media, where
Mm,
we see like in my instance with young girls like my age, just you know living basically beyond the scope of our kind of our time, instead of like really focusing on building ourselves and establishing ourselves. Um, I don't want to say legitimately, because I'm not saying what they're doing is illegitimate, but
mm.
growing yourself in a way that is, um, what's the word, that has longevity in it. Like I feel like we're living a very fast lifestyle, where like everything's just happening so quickly in terms of like acquiring like material things and going on vacations in like overseas, and I'm like 21. And I mean, if that's happening with some of you guys, I'm really happy for you. But ask yourself, is what I'm doing currently for my life and in my life like for the long term gain, because I feel like this culture is so focused on short lived pleasures, and that's what's being recorded and shared with us. And like me as the ordinary person would be like, yo, this person is living life to the most,
Mm,
like doing the most of their life, I mean. And I feel left out because I feel like, I'm pretty much the same age as this person or the same age group, but I'm nowhere near doing what they're doing. And, it just kind of puts a damp on my self esteem. And I can't even imagine, like, other people like myself, how they must feel. And it is not really a good place to be.
yeah, I feel like to sum up what you're saying, like for me, my perspective is I feel like the culture has removed the stages of life.
Yeah,
Like everything is now rushed and everything is now in an in moment, you
in a
know?
moment.
Like we see people posting on social media, they buying cars. We see people posting on social media, they're going on grand vacations.
Right.
And then we like, oh, like I want that for myself. Like I want it now. But we forget that, hey, that person's like 10, 15 years ahead of me,
Right.
or they in a position that allows them
To do
to
so.
live in that manner because they're working or they have finances maybe from families. They come from really, financially supported families, and they have the means that allows them to live in a certain way that they are living. And we as outsiders, excuse me, see that and then we feel like I want that or I need that, or if I have what that person has, then I'll be as great as them,
As
and
them.
it sometimes forces us to lose ourselves because now we start living a very chased life. Like
Right.
we're always chasing things like we need more, 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 more,
More.
more,
We never
more to feel
satisfied.
validated rather than actually validating ourselves and really, like you said, looking within ourselves to see like are we really making moves that are beneficial to us? Are we really doing things that is going to benefit us in the long run? Or are we doing things that's going to benefit us in the moment and get us the glory that we desire from the public and external factors?
Right. Basically, a short lived fantasy is what we're seeing. And then we kind of base our sort of expectations or our value as individuals in like that comparison, not bearing in mind that we do not come from the same circumstances, nor we are currently in the same circumstances. Like not everybody is meant to be in their position, because it's their life and they have a specific purpose that's specific to them. But it's very difficult to assert yourself in a manner that is realistic and appropriate to you because that's all you see. And eventually, if you're not like a person that's grounded and not easily swayed by like the moving trends of like social media, for instance, then you'll find yourself just chasing after every trend and every style that's in right now, or talking a certain way, or doing a certain hairstyle that you feel is in right now, and just you eventually chase this lifestyle, like my co-host said, to a point where you just end up losing yourself in chasing your life and living this fast life instead of living a life that is fulfilling and a long term sustainable one.
Mhm. And that's true because it's like it also shows like a sense of incompleteness. Like not necessary to say like the people that post the things that they have or post the things that they're doing are incomplete, or they feel like their life value depends in the hands of the other person or the person viewing what they sharing. But I feel like it also shows a sense of like, you know, indirectly placing your value in someone else's hands. Because the reason I say this is because I often hear this question asked a lot, and it's a very like true and realistic question. of like when you look at wealthy people, like the big entrepreneurs or the big successes of this world, do you see them posting that, hey, they're going to Gucci? Do you see them posting like, hey, I am at Prada? Do you see them posting that I just bought the latest Porsche, or I just bought $100 million house or $100 million house? Like, you don't really see those kind of um content from them. Not necessarily to say because like they better than the people that are sharing those things, but in a sense of like they are content in knowing that I don't need the next person to validate what I have
What I
to
have.
make it my reality. Because I feel
Exactly.
like sometimes we mistaken that as individuals, especially the youth, that something will only become meaningful and validated once the next person approves of it.
Right. And that's a really sad reality that we're currently facing today because we're living in a place where it's very difficult to be content with what you have and who you are as a person because you're always chasing the next thing, because you're always seeing people chasing other things and doing other things and saying other things, and you just find yourself in this whirlwind of discontentment, if that's even a word, and it's like, where do you even draw the line, because there's this fear of, if I'm content with what I have and who I am as a person, then I'm no longer relevant, because trends kind of look at, what's the new thing,
Mm,
and you know it's constantly changing. So if you're remaining the same, in who you are and what you do, then you lose kind of that sense of relevance, because when something's new, it tends to get more attention and it's more relevant at that time than, that old thing that is constant and content, and that kind of comparison is really like tricky for an individual to, you know, figure out a way to place themselves in those two kind of realms, because you want to be relevant, you want to, keep up with the times, but you don't want to, lose yourself in the midst of keeping up with the times. And sometimes we tend to forget that this new culture that we're in right now doesn't necessarily align like with the people that we are internally, but we're so fixated on the external factors of material wealth and what we wear and who we see and who we're with or seen with, that we are willing to sacrifice the internal things, the people that we are, to please other people, to get that external validation my co-host was talking about. And it will get to a point where there is a no point of return, because it becomes a habit where you're
mm,
used to doing those things of, not staying true to yourself, but making other people happy, your fans, your followers, whoever it is that you're trying to be relevant to. You prioritizing them and putting their interests before yours, to
mm,
the point where you start losing yourself and you start, you know, doing things to escape that unhappiness, or better, not better yet, but worse yet, find yourself in a position where it's very difficult for you to just cope with just living every day, because this is what you do, this is who you are, and this is who you're known for. You're a brand now, you're no longer a human being. And I feel like that's what we're seeing currently in influencers, that you know there is a level of detachment between who they are as people and what they do. They
mm,
tend to
mm,
sort of join those two aspects of themselves together as one, where it's very difficult to draw the line
mm.
between those two parts of themselves. And it's quite sad to see in them, but it's also more sad to see in people that follow them, that follow what they're doing and aspire to be those things that they're doing.
Yeah, that is true. Like, it's kind of like what people say, like selling your soul to the devil.
Yeah,
Like, like you basically sell yourself to get all the greatness out of life, to get the finances, to get the materials, to get the image, to get the brands, to get like this platform where you are a huge impact to people's lives. And, like people feel like you just that thing that they need to associate themselves with in order to be relevant. And like going back to what you're saying about influencers and how like it comes to a point in time where it's like it's hard for them to separate themselves from their brand and their personal lives, like the things that they do as a career and who they really are like outside of that.
Mm.
And the sad thing is like the most thing that causes that, I feel like, are also the supporters, because it's like not necessarily saying that what supporters are doing is wrong, but like supporters hold celebrities or influencers to the image that they present publicly at such a high standard that it also needs to be who they are in their private life.
Mm.
And if they're not that, then they're considered as fake people. They're considered
Right.
as like two faced, and they just get bashed for that. But like, oh, on social media, you're like this, that. But when I met you at a mall, you were like some kind of way,
Yeah.
you were like closed off, you were like rude. And it's like, some people say, but oh, that's what you signed up for. That's what you signed up for when you went the path of being an influencer or being a public figure. And that's not always the case, because, even TD Jakes once said how, like, he never wanted the fame that came with him, like, being a preacher, but then he said it was one of the effects of being impactful, and when you're impactful, you draw attention. Whether you like it or you don't, people are going to notice you, and they're going to notice the things that you do and you talk about. And, we should never like mistaken the two for impact, and it was something that you were driven to get, because not everybody wants to be famous. Some people just want to do what they're truly passionate about, and it just so happens that it attracts the attention of others in a grand scheme of numbers, that it creates fame for them.
Yeah. Which brings us to the question of, are we the creators of culture, or does culture create us?
Mm,
And I feel like that's a question that's related to what you just said, because it's a two-way street, this question, in the sense that the trends that we're currently seeing are part of the culture that we are within today. But in that culture that has been created by these trends, people create these trends.
mm,
And it's those creators that you're talking about, where we kind of debating this perception of a two-way fall between the people that they are and the brand that they are, and how they kind of joining those two forces into one. But then when it comes to now them living their life outside of what they're doing, they can't, because that is the image, that is the way they are portraying themselves to the general public, and that's how they gain that position of influence and relevance, to a point where that's all they're known for. And so it's difficult for them to undo what they've been doing to get to the place that they currently are at. And so with us, the followers, or the people that are looking up to these people, we're aspiring, some of us are aspiring to be those kind of influencers, or being in that certain industry, but not knowing the full effects that are behind that in itself. And it goes back to the question of now, is what you, like, the intention of what you're doing in terms of being an influencer. Are you influencing people because you feel like your platform that you're currently wanting to establish will be of a positive impact, for instance, or you're doing it to be relevant, an in moment relevance, a short lived relevance, or do you want to create some sense of longevity? And I feel like with most influencers nowadays, it's more of a short term gain, because they now, getting endorsement deals, brand ambassadors for, certain companies and products, and just, you know, in that space to kind of not only create a name for themselves, but to also acquire some sort of materialistic gain to show that, they are of a certain status in society. And in that, there's a certain level of detachment, like I said earlier on, in focusing on their brand and doing whatever it takes to maintain that brand. And it's quite sad now when we're talking about now mentioning instances where their brand is now threatened by either the things that they're saying or they're doing, and now having to now put out statements or apologies to kind of mitigate that risk of like ruining their brand. And you kind of question now the humanity behind the person behind the brand, basically, because you know they sort of weigh the brand that they have higher than the person that they are. They create
Mm,
value within themselves based on the brand that they are, the brand that they've created.
mm,
And it's also teaching us, the youth and the young people that are looking up to them, that you're only relevant, you're only valuable as a person if you're a brand, if you uh, kind of an entity where you do things that you're known for, and you kind of maintain that relevance in doing that, but you're not maintaining relevance in being the person that you are, and you're losing yourself in doing that.
yeah, that is true. And like what you're saying is actually reminding me of this whole R. Kelly situation when, his private life was publicly like exposed of how he
Expose.
treats women and,
Yeah.
basically the way that he carries himself in his personal life. And people
Right.
associated that with his music. They're like, oh, we need to stop listening to R. Kelly's music because that's a form of you supporting what he's doing. And I always asked myself, how is me listening to his music supporting what he's doing? Because those are two completely different things. Like,
Apparently, he was making some of the songs that he's known for. He made about the things that he was doing behind the scenes. Like I'm saying, these are the things that are being said by the people who are discouraging the general public, basically, to listen to his music based on what you just said. But
yeah,
continue.
and it goes back to like what I'm saying about the separation of a person, who they are as an individual, and the things that they do. Because who R. Kelly is as a musician is also obviously going to be different from who he is as a person in his personal life. Not necessarily to say that he condones or proves or disapproves of anything that's situated around that matter, but it was just another example that came to my mind of associating personal life with people's
With
brands and
Yeah,
careers.
yeah, because his career ended like after that,
Yeah,
especially when the trial was like concluded in the matter that was alleged to him at the time. And which goes back to now the point I was making about how influencers and really well known people out there with their brands doing anything basically to build and maintain their brands, that there's a level of detachment in humanity. Like it's very difficult to now see whether someone's being genuine out of the goodness of their heart, or they're doing it to protect and maintain the brand that they are trying to maintain.
yeah, that is true. But another like aspect towards the culture we consume is the expectations that it comes with. And these expectations are, as much as they are individual expectations, but they also gender expectations of, as a woman you should carry yourself in a certain way and be doing certain things, and as a male and as a guy you also should be doing certain things and carrying yourself in a certain way. Like, for example, the biggest trends and topics that have been coming a lot to surface is about this whole thing of like how guys, need to be providers. They need to have jobs, they need to have cars, they need to be able to financially sustain a woman, and some guys are like, but why aren't women financially sustaining themselves? Why do they need me to come into their life to do that thing? And I'm not really gonna dive too much into that because a lot of people might make it personal and they might feel offended and want to have a whole debate about that. But to me, that's also another expectation that comes with the culture we consume from a gender's point of view.
Yeah, we are actually going to talk about that more in depth in the next episode after this because it is indeed a topic of interest and a topic that is not often talked about enough from a neutral standpoint because, like Michael said, there's often a lot of emotions associated with those kind of topics. But to add on to what he was saying about gender expectations, I feel like there's also an expectation on women as well. But I feel like we are creating the
Mm,
expectation that is being expected of us from these influencers and well known people because they are the ones creating these trends that we as ordinary people are looking up to. For example, girls my age, like I'm currently gonna turn 21 very soon. And so girls my age now, are, seen wearing like the swankiest or fanciest clothes, like, revealing clothes and weaves and like long nails and eyelashes and like makeup and just, really, really, really looking their best. And I'm not really hating on that, but now it kind of sets the bar really high because apparently you're now of value when you look a certain way, and if you don't look that certain way then you're not of value, not relevant. you know Men like are now basing their types on what they see externally, forgetting that with the help of makeup, with the help of a weave, with the help of certain clothing that like enhances our natural beauty, that is the bar that's being set, that's the expectation that's being set on us because we're setting those expectations. And now the rest of us who are not conforming to that standard are feeling left behind. We struggle with those areas of interest when we talk about relationships, for instance, because you know a certain like male we might be into might not be really into us because they're really into someone else who's like looking that way that I just described, and now you feel like you have to sort of conform to that trend, that standard of, looking your best in that aspect, but you're not remaining true to yourself because you're chasing some a male who's going to be able to financially provide for you and give you the life that you desire or the love that you desire, for instance.
yeah, that's true. But basically, like, I just feel like the culture that we consume basically has rules and regulations for every aspect of life. If you're a male, be this kind of male. If you're a woman, be this kind of woman. If you doing this, do this in a certain way. I feel like it's another way that we use to like guide our lives and guide like the aspects that we do in order to feel like we are being the norm. Because I feel like the culture we consume is what defines the norm of
Right.
today's world that we live in. And a lot of people are afraid of being outcast, they're afraid of being neglected, they're afraid of like feeling invalidated, so they just end up like, basically confining to the expectations of this culture of
Yeah.
like, let me just do this, let me just be this person so I can fit in, I can be okay,
Yeah.
and life will be fine for me, rather as if I'm considered weird or an outcast, and I'm just gonna be like a loner. And there's really nothing wrong with being a loner. Like, people make it like it's a sad thing if you're a loner, or if you don't have a lot of numbers around you or associated with you. But I feel like it's the total opposite. I feel like when you're able to just comfortably be on your own, that showed me like much, much, much comfortability in your own skin, rather than always feeling the desire to surround yourself with other people that can make you feel whole, you know, in that certain aspect. But overall, I just feel like the culture is really what's negating the life that we live.
Yeah, very, very, very well said. And to close it off, we would like to say that this topic that we're gonna or that we have discussed rather, we'll have a part two where we're talking about very, very specific examples and instances where we feel like certain trends have shaped society and not in the best way to make us feel that, it's killing the youth and instead of building the youth, and how this culture already impacts us as the youth, and the
Mm,
future that is left
mm,
of this society rather, um, should we not do something about it?
that is true. And also in closing, I feel like, along with what you said, like the culture, it groups us rather than promotes individuality. And I feel like that's the main thing that's killing the youth is us losing our sense of individuality and just preferring to be a group, existing in a world, which I feel like is problematic because it limits a lot of things that the world can become and also who we as individuals can become if we stay strong in who we are as beings and true to ourselves in general.
Yeah. So with that said, guys, do stay tuned for part two of this episode topic. And with that said, we're out. Peace and love.
We out. Peace and love, guys.